James Patterson, the best-selling crime and mystery novelist, apologized for saying that Caucasian males, aka white men, are kept from getting writing jobs due to racism. Patterson said in an interview that he feared it's become increasingly difficult for white male writers to obtain jobs in film and publishing, calling it just another form of racism. Patterson was quick to backtrack on his comments in a Facebook post, saying, quote, "I absolutely do not believe that racism is practiced against white writers. Please know that I strongly support the diversity of voices being heard in literature and Hollywood everywhere." But maybe, just maybe, he's got a point here. Now joining us is Omékongo Dibinga, Professor of Intercultural Communication at the American University. Professor, I'm so glad to be talking to you today. I've been waiting for it for a long while now, so thank you for coming on the show. And my first question to you is simple, and I will try to be delicate, not trying to make a grandiose, white man tragedy here, but maybe, in the sake of diversity, the bottom line is that white men are on the losing side at this point in time.
No. Well, the question becomes, as Chris, and thanks for having me. As Chris Rock said, the comedian, if white men are losing, who's winning? When we have these debates, we have to stick to the facts. And the facts that I'm going to read real quickly is that the New York Times in 2020 found that 89% of books published in 2018 were penned by white writers, even though non-Hispanic white people make up 60% of the population.
Yeah.
And the Writers Guild of America in 2021 found that 77% of screenwriters are white, and white men accounted for more than 50% of that. So somebody once said that when you're used to privilege, equality looks like oppression.
Right.
So I do not believe that white writers are losing, and we're talking about a man who sold over 450 million copies. I think he's doing all right.
Yeah, but again, and was very quick to take his statement back. So I really don't want to, fuel the ambush here. And I was picking up this data you've just illustrated, Professor. How do you explain this gap in sentiment and data? Because there is a feeling that some privileges are being taken away from those who used to enjoy it.
So one of the problems with what James Patterson said is that even though he did not intentionally do this, he's playing into the debates that are going on in America right now about white replacement theory. When you see people protesting in places like Virginia, saying Jews will not replace us, when you see some of the racism being targeted against Black, Asian, and Hispanic people, there's this idea that white people are being targeted because there's a fear based on the census data that come 2040, 2050, white people are no longer going to be in the majority.
Right.
And so there's been a backlash on that in our academic institutions, in our professional world. And so the real issue that we've had over the years is that the reason why you are seeing more non-white writers is because more non-white writers are getting more access to the good old boys network that other people have never had access to. Publishing has primarily been a white business. As somebody who's worked for years to get a book deal, you can see, and I finally have one, thank you, but you see the networks. If you don't know, you don't know. Yeah. And it's the same thing in Hollywood. I think you might recall the idea of Oscars so white trending a few years ago was because even though non-white people were making movies, they weren't getting the recognition. So all we're talking about here is non-white writers getting an opportunity to be more recognized.
So I don't know if you watched this one. I'm not a huge TV fan, but I did watch The White Lotus, and there was a sentence there that resonates with me, saying, I'm perhaps misquoting, that no company can allow itself at this point in time to hire a white Ivy League male graduate or something along those lines. But we can agree that you don't fix an injustice with an injustice, and I'm sorry for being difficult here. I'm just asking, is there an overcorrection to an extent?
I don't believe that it's an overcorrection. I don't believe that it's an injustice. So we have to understand that affirmative action is not a law. Affirmative action is a policy. So companies and schools, they can decide whatever they want to do as it relates to their admission and hiring practices. And we know that in America, the overwhelming majority of CEOs are still white men. We know that the overwhelming majority of people who are going to be placed in courts and other places have been majority white men. The question becomes, what is America willing to do to start to balance out a system that for hundreds of years has excluded people who are equally, if not more, qualified? So I don't look at it as an injustice versus another injustice. It's about access. And one thing we also have to understand is that James Patterson's new book has a black character. We're also seeing more white writers create black characters and selling more than the black authors with black characters. So that's also something that is a contradiction in what we're seeing as well that needs to be corrected.
Well, the pendulum is shifting and not everyone likes it. What can I say? This is how history is evolving itself. Dr. Omékongo Dibinga, Professor of Intercultural Communication at the American University. I was waiting to speak to you, and I was right because it was fascinating. So thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank you.